Okay, can you guys see my screen? Fantastic. So, just kind of our intro slide for this meeting, and then because we want to shamelessly plug our conference at here at the Texas Technology Access Program, we wanted to let you guys know about the conference that we have coming up in June of this year, from the 11th to 12th, down here in Austin at our research campus at the University of Texas. And basically, Shannon, do you have a couple of things that you want to share about, like either registrations or discounts? But essentially, we're welcoming people with disabilities, their family members, caregivers, as well as disability professionals, as well as y'all as makers. Please, we're be very happy to have y'all here at the conference. But yeah, I'll direct any kind of questions that y'all might have with registration to Shannon if you guys have more specifics. But yeah. But I'll go ahead and stop share. Let's see
And
here.
if they have questions, they can put the questions about the conference in the chat,
Oh,
and we're going to go
yes.
ahead and let Antoinette get started. So if you could introduce Antoinette.
Yes, absolutely. And we are so happy to have Antoinette on the call today. Antoinette will give a little bit of background of herself in a minute, but she is the founder and lead consultant at ImproveAbility, which is an AT consulting firm here in Austin. And we're really excited to have her because she's going to kind of talk about the relationship that could be possible between both makers and AT professionals. And let me just double check, Antoinette, that you for sure have screen sharing privileges. If not, let's see here. Uh, I'm going to just put it on to multiple participants can share simultaneously, but hopefully you should now have screen sharing access, and I'll turn on over to you. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited. I feel like something's in the ether and there's this groundswell happening. I'm really excited to see this group form and some things that I'm working on. I think they're very synergistic. So before I get into my presentation, I kind of want to just know who's in the room. So if you could quickly in the chat, just put if you're an AT professional or a maker or both, that would really help me to know kind of who I'm talking to. So the presentation I'm getting ready to, yes, I know you, Ron. And actually you're going to see some of your handiwork in my presentation. So
I didn't want to pressure you or anything.
and this is, I want to have a conversation here. So I actually have some spots, this isn't, I mean, I'm presenting some stuff, but then there's some spots where I really kind of want to have a discussion. Then we're going to have plenty of time to have some discussion at the end. So this is something that's kind of been bubbling in me because I'm an AT professional, but I'm a maker wannabe. Like if I had free time, I would love to learn how to do all this stuff. Shannon's saying yes too. So what I've decided is instead of me learning it, I'm going to find people who already know how to do the stuff and make them make the things I want them to make. So that's kind of this the whole maker idea has been so interesting to me. And then I'm gonna kind of present the problem, which I think we already know, but kind of this is a presentation I've given at 2 conferences now, and literally I forget what day it is, but I think it's Friday this week. Me and my co-chair are gonna meet, so like this is happening. So I'm really excited. And like I said, I think that this group might be interested in the specific thing I'm starting, but also for us all to kind of get together. So I will go ahead and share my screen and kind of maybe avert your eyes for a second, just because people get overwhelmed because I have so many tabs open, but that's just the way that's the way I work. So let me find the presentation and we'll get this started. Okay. So as Cole said, I am the founder and owner of ImproveAbility. My background is in engineering. So my undergraduate degree is in mechanical engineering, and then my graduate degree is in biomedical engineering. And the program I went to was specifically for working with people with disabilities. So I'm probably like one of the few people that actually went to school for this. A lot of people in the AT world kind of come at it from many different angles. I have been practicing since 2000, and I got my ATP in 2004, and then my RET certification, I decided to go ahead and get that in 2021. So my first job out of college, I actually worked for vocational rehab in the state of Mississippi. And then after that, I worked for the ALS Association in New York City. And then in 2011, I moved to the great state of Texas. I grew up in New Orleans, that's where I'm from. And so I moved to Texas in 2011 and started ImproveAbility. So like I said, I'm gonna kind of make my case, but I think I've presented this enough now to know that I'm not the only one who's thinking the same things I'm thinking. So there, I have kind of answered that question for myself. But again, I'm gonna stop a couple times and definitely want some input. So especially, particularly for those of you that are not coming at this from the AT industry, I think it's kind of helpful. Don't worry, I'm not going to give a 3-hour lecture on the history of assistive technology, which we could do if we wanted to. So I'm kind of saying the modern AT era started in around 1980. So we were talking about 40, 50 years ago. And when, I mean, AT was happening before that, World War II, prosthetics and stuff like that. But I'm kind of taking 1980 as kind of like our starting point. So at that point, if you said the word assistive technology, people were really talking about seeing mobility. And there were, there was assistive technology for people with visual and hearing impairments. That was around as well. And again, today's not to like give a full history lesson, but this is kind of just setting the stage for what I want to talk about. Again, if any of y'all were around during that time, personal computers and consumer electronics were not a thing. People, I mean, maybe some people had a computer in the house, but it was not something that everybody had. And people with disabilities were not well integrated into society. There were very limited commercially available products in assistive technology. And the reason I kind of picked that time frame is that's kind of when rehab engineers kind of came on the scene, where things were starting to happen. So rehab engineers, OTs, and others working in rehab did a lot of custom building. So if you go to, like, I could give you an example, NYU, their hospital, they have a machine shop that, that was part of the rehab department, because back in the day, they had to make the things because they literally didn't exist. So if you didn't fit into kind of, nursing home wheelchair, there wasn't assistive technology for you. So if an OT and an engineer wanted to get together and make something happen, they would literally have to make it. So I guess I'm getting to this age now where I'm not the youngest person in the room anymore by any stretch. So what I've learned, because I've also presented at a couple of colleges, is that there's a lot of people alive and now in professional practice who were born after 1990. If you were born before 1990, you may or may not remember the ADA being passed. That was a total game changer. So if you were someone who was born after 1990, you may not realize how big of an impact that made. Yes, we had the Rehab Act of 1973 and IDEA, and that started to kind of whittle away at societal attitudes towards the need for accommodation. I graduated high school in 1993, and then I went to graduate school working for people with disabilities. So I can tell you, and again, correct me if people who were around that time, I'm curious to hear what you had to say, but I specifically remember, and maybe my kind of antenna were up more because I was going into this field. But at that time, like in the mid to late 90s, it was a weekly top like headline news story. Joe suing Hilton because they don't meet the ADA requirements. Like, it was major news because big corporations were having to spend a lot of money to retrofit their buildings, because the ADA applied to public accommodations. So it was in the news, and it was something that was talked about. And so what I realized is people who were born after that time, they don't even realize, like, it's almost, we could kind of equate it to the civil rights era. I was born in 1975. So those things had happened. So for me, integrating people racially, like, was kind of like, well, of course, that's the world we live in. Well, same thing with people with disabilities. I feel like we're kind of living in this post-ADA era where people just assume any new building is 100% compliant with the ADA accessibility guidelines, and that everything's accessible. and talk to a person with disability, they will tell you quickly that that's not the case. So in this post-ADA era, people do assume that everything's accessible, which is not true. And accessibility outside of physical accommodations is being talked about because kind of the ADA kind of pushed this idea of the built environment should be accessible. That was a big push of it. Obviously, there was other parts to it. But we've kind of graduated from that now. So now we're talking about other areas that should be accessible. And when the ADA was passed, the ADA-AG, the accessibility guidelines were developed, and they were updated in 2012, and they pretty much stayed the same since then. And the update didn't really change a lot as far as the actual requirements. They basically took out all the pictures because everyone was going straight to the pictures, and they added in some tolerances that they didn't have before. So really the guidelines were set, we're talking about for the built environment. And that's kind of pretty much where they stayed, and they're doing a fine job. I'm not mad at them. So since the ADA has passed, we now live in the society, at least on paper. Again, I'm not saying that everything's accessible, but we have this civil rights law to fall back on that wants people with disabilities to fully participate. So there has been a huge societal shift in attitudes towards people with disabilities. And now we have legislation for those who feel that they're being discriminated against to have their day in court. So particularly when we talk about the built environment, there's almost no company that can say, oh, sorry, we can't make our building accessible. We have so much, we have 30 years of case law that says that's not really true. So when I started practicing in 2000, I really feel like it was an inflection point in the AT world, because kind of the people before me were doing a lot of custom work. And then kind of right when I started was when there was this groundswell of commercially available products that had been custom made in the past. Are there still people out there that are custom cutting foam and upholstering seats? Yes, they are still out there, but it's a handful of people in the country. And another thing about that time frame is that there was a handful of resources for AT. So pretty much if you knew everything that was in those 3 catalogs, you knew all the commercially available assistive technology in the world. Fast forward 24 years, and where we are now is that really very little custom fabrication is being done. We could kind of break down by categories, but in general, there's so much commercially available that can be customized to a certain extent that the need for custom fabrication has come down a lot. But then we kind of have this rise of personal computing, consumer electronics being ubiquitous in our lives, and people with disabilities want to interact with those, and they want to, participate with those items just like anybody else. So when you look at where the AT industry has come from and the status of public accommodations, there's now this new emerging market for custom devices. So with consumer electronics being so ubiquitous, I'm saying everyone wants to use the same stuff. Like, you can't custom make a phone. You have the phone. If you want to use a cell phone, this is what you have to work with. Also, as I'm sure y'all are all intimately aware of, the cost of making hard and soft costs has dramatically decreased, and the maker community has exploded. And I'm not talking about in AT, I'm talking about just in life. So we, as part of the AT industry, should take advantage of this to serve our clients and use that knowledge to our benefit and to our clients' benefit. So the places where AT professionals can find solutions is no longer a small list of resources. So I don't know about you guys, but I've really gotten to this place where I'm on listservs, I'm on Facebook groups, I'm on LinkedIn groups. I go on Kickstarter every once in a while, and you really have to have this wide net, and conferences and all those things, because it's not just 3 catalogs anymore. It's a guy in his garage making a thing that is useful, and the only way to know about that thing is to accidentally find out about it. So just as an example, if you go on Kickstarter, I did this right before ATIA. So, right at the end of the year, if I put in assistive technology, I got 29 projects. But anyone who's an AT professional, if you spent 10 minutes on Kickstarter, I think you could find more than 29 products that are out there that we would use as assistive technology. And then you have things like App Store, crowdfunding, Etsy. So it's literally impossible. I've even gotten to where I tell clients now, if someone walks in this door and they tell you they know everything that's out there, you literally need to send them packing, because either they've just kind of stopped in their knowledge accruement and you're only going to get the choice of the things that they use, and they're not someone who's really staying on top of things. So really, AT solutions have become decentralized, which has pros and cons. And like I said, really I've started to use, I would say Facebook groups is probably the top #1 place now that I go to find if I have a question. I used to use lists. I'm on a number of listservs, but those are kind of, they are what they are. But really Facebook groups and LinkedIn groups have kind of become the place to find sources. So this is a big generalization, so we could talk about this for hours, but in general, what I'm saying is that kind of the big stuff, the built environment, wheelchairs for most people, kind of these big things have kind of been figured out. We don't need new solutions for a ramp. We got tons of options for ramps. If someone needs a wheelchair, there's, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of products out there that can be cobbled together to make a good solution for them. So commercial AT really fulfills the need for much of the AT market. But just as AT is kind of a smaller market, makers can help us fill the gaps for those pieces that there aren't commercial solutions for. So what we're talking about is a small market of a small market. So now I kind of want to shift into talking about where makers can help. So I kind of have a couple different categories here. So one is customizations to commercial equipment. So I'm going to assume most people are familiar with this, like switch adapting thing. So switch adapting a toy for a kid to use. The picture in the middle is a one-handed game controller. And then this is actually one of Ron products, which is a Wii remote that was adapted for computer use. So these are commercial items that are being modified so that someone who cannot access them in the standard way can have access to them. So we didn't make the toy, we're doing something to the toy so that someone with a disability can access it. Another way that the makers can help is fulfilling the lost function of a discontinued product. So the picture on the left is a product called IntelliKeys, which was stopped being produced, like, I don't know, at this point, we're probably like 7, 8 years now, at least 10 years. Yeah. But apparently there's lots of them out there, like lots and lots. And there are some people that this was a good solution for them. And as technology has changed, once it was discontinued, they could no longer, there was a point where it stopped working with current operating systems. So there's a group called AT Makers who make a interface. They designed an interface, and it's actually a really interesting story that I'm not going to go into now. Bill will be happy to tell you if you ever want to know it, about how he got the information to make the interface. So they make an interface. So Shannon's holding up something. So they make an interface that makes it so that you can plug it into any USB device, PC or Mac, and continue to use it. She's got it Intel keys, but it's
I
funny.
think, yeah, Shannon would need to turn off
Have,
the background.
when people have posted, like someone will post on AT Makers, hey, how do I get this IntelliKeys thing? Literally, people will say, I have 10 in my closet, at my school. So there's a lot of them out there. So that's one example. Another example is one of my projects was the Logitech Harmony. We were using it in our environmental control systems for a very, very, very specific purpose. And it has been discontinued. So after buying like the 20th one off of eBay, I'm like, I was having trouble finding another solution. So I think that was right around the time that I connected with Ron, and for good or bad, I got him on board to help me solve that problem. And then this is another product that me and Ron worked on, was creating a targeted product for a very specific population and technical need. So this is for, we have a bed controller that is commercially available, but it doesn't have voice commands. And so if someone, and this particular solution does not require the internet. So someone in a nursing home wants to be able to operate their bed via voice, we have a solution for that. So that is not a commercially available product. So I kind of want to open up the floor to what are some other areas that people think that makers could be helpful in the AT industry with?
I can go ahead and go. This is Cole. I think another point that we brought up previous meeting was especially when it comes to just funding devices and thinking about solutions in general, like recreation is a big area
Yeah.
where there's definitely a definite need for customization, that there's not a lot of commercial products out there. And kind of an interesting example of this is Montana's assistive technology program. They're kind of miles ahead of us when it comes to really great AT when it comes to recreation, especially when it comes to fishing. But they have like in the state, they have somebody who's like dedicated to doing really interesting like fishing rod modifications, and like again, having that connection, having that person is so key. So that's kind of going on off of that. I think recreation is a big piece where makers can definitely.
And that's a good, that's the reason that there aren't commercial products is because it's outside of kind of most funding models,
Yeah,
unless
yeah.
you're a fisherman as a job. So that's, yeah, that's a really, I didn't think of it that way, like kind of areas that aren't captured by funding sources would be areas that makers could really find solutions that don't cost as that aren't super expensive.
Absolutely. And in the chat, we have Nico put disaster preparedness. Another person put deaf and hard of hearing equipment, second screens for captioning. Additionally, Shannon put personalized recreation equipment since interests are so varied.
Yeah, no, those are all great. So kind of, I feel like we're kind of come full circle to where I'm calling it assistive technology 2.0. So in 1980, we were having to make wheelchair stuff because they didn't exist. We've kind of, there's a whole industry about that. I'm just using wheelchairs as an example. We now have this whole industry of assistive technology that has solved a lot of these problems. But now there's kind of this new wave of issues that makers can really get involved with. So I'm going to give you two stories that I think kind of really illustrate this very well. So this was a client that I worked with. I got a call from her occupational therapist, and she starts describing, okay, I have this client. Her main goal was she wanted to write like journal entries. So I'm thinking, okay, easy peasy. And so she starts describing her to me. She doesn't have good speech. Okay, so I'm already like taking off options. Okay, I got options for that. Oh, and she has really bad proprioception. Okay, and she really has like almost no feeling in her hands. Okay, so it's like as she's describing her to me, we're like checking all the boxes off in a bad way. So long story short, I met with her. We kind of tried a couple things, and what I determined was, because she mainly wanted to type, with her limitations, Morse code was going to be the quickest way for her to output text. So I figured out solutions for how she could navigate the iPad, because that was already there and she could hear and her vision was really bad. Her hearing was good, thank you. So she had that sense intact. So with auditory scanning, I could set things up so that she could hear what was happening on the screen, but the typing, to scan, she would have to scan letter by letter. So to go through 26 letters every time you want to type a letter is not efficient at all. So that's where I thought of Morse code. So the piece of this puzzle that there was not a commercially available product for was a Morse code keyboard. So this is a number of years ago. It was probably like maybe 5 years ago. So I posted on the AT Makers page. I kind of gave a short example of what I was looking for. it would take me a minute to, I don't even remember the gentleman's name, but someone reached out to me because I knew this was technically very simple. I just didn't have the know-how to do it. So guy says, oh yeah, sure, I can do that. And honestly, I think he was willing to do it for free, but I paid him money to do it because it was work that he was doing. So he sends me, it was a Bluetooth Morse code keyboard, but the part of the story that I think is really interesting is I got it. And so of course as soon as I got it, I plugged my switches and I'm testing it. And I immediately knew there was a problem because when he programmed it, he assumed that she could output a Morse code character in 1 second, which if you're not familiar with Morse code, some of them have up to 4 dot dashes and her movement was very slow. So on the inside, I had a little freak out. I'm like, okay, what are we gonna do? So I told him I called him and told him what was going on. The good news was the timing was actually programmed. So it was something that could be adjusted. So he showed me how to adjust it. So I think that's a really good example of makers and AT people working together because as a maker, Morse code keyboard, any able-bodied person could input 4 characters in a second without a problem. But there's no way that she would have been able to. So that little tweak made the difference between it being usable or not. So the picture that I'm showing here is, it's hard to see, but you may be able to see one of the black switches that's, it's kind of Velcroed onto the inside of the drawer. So she had 2 of those, and I don't remember because it's been more years now. So she had 2 sets of switches. She had 2 switches that were for navigating the iPad. So, I don't remember exactly how he had it set up. I think it was next one, next one, next one. That's the one I want. And then the other 2 switches were when it was time to type, she could just input the Morse code codes. And it would, so if she did ... it type a S, ... it type a O. And actually she learned Morse code really fast. She was really smart. So it was a really great solution for her. This is a project that me and Ron worked on. So again, I kind of already talked about the Harmony Hub. So we were using that because the bed interface that we use uses infrared. So I needed something that I could interface with infrared, that could send out infrared and also communicate to Alexa for voice commands. And so basically I said, I need a thing that does this, this, and this. And Ron made me a thing. So it was a very, kind of a very narrow application. We're not trying to change channel on TV and do all the things that Harmony wants to do. I just needed a replacement for this function that I was using it for. So that was another example of how a maker could help with that. So I really want other AT professionals to be able to get their weird projects accomplished. So if you have, because I'm sure anyone on this call or anyone in the sound of my voice that works in the AT industry, we have kind of our go-to solutions, but there's always, you're gonna often encounter clients that just isn't the right solution. So if there's not a thing that fits that, how do we solve that? That's where makers come in. So, and kind of part and parcel of that is I want makers to be welcomed into the AT industry. If we can educate makers on the needs of people with disabilities, that's where the magic happens. So like my example with the Morse code, any old maker could make a Morse code keyboard, but I needed one that had that specific feature that had the timing in it so that this client could use it. Another example that I like to use is I saw a documentary of a guy with ALS who was a graffiti artist before he got ALS. Now, this movie was made probably in like 2012-ish, so kind of old, technology-wise for today. But he really wanted to get back into doing graffiti, which even back then, eye gaze was a thing, but trying to do graffiti with eye gaze is very different than communication. So it's kind of a similar story to the Morse code keyboard. I'm really shortening a 2-hour movie, and it wasn't really about the technology. It was really more about his personal journey. But of course, I pulled out the AT piece of it. So like the first 30 minutes of the movie, I'm kind of screaming on the inside because they're acting like there's nobody out there that helps people with disabilities and technology. And I'm kind of like, hello, AT exists. So somehow his friend did find out about Tobii Dynavox. So once I heard that, I'm like, okay, finally, we're like connected with the AT industry. But for whatever reason, somehow he also got connected with Dell. And the guy lives in California. Somehow they got him connected with Dell. So the idea is, oh, these Dell engineers are going to give him this eye gaze thing so that he can go back to doing graffiti. And so they get all excited and, the engineers come, it's this kind of big to do. We're gonna, so they actually made him an eye-worn eye gaze camera. So the idea was he would move his eyes the way you do graffiti, which is really hard to do, but that was the idea. And it was the closest replication they could make. It technically worked, except kind of like with the Morse code keyboard, they assumed that he could blink. He could not do a normal blink. His blink was super slow, and I don't know that he was able to like fully close his eye. And their design kind of depended on that. So I think that was another example of engineers coming up with a good solution, but not knowing what questions to ask disability-wise, and there was a mismatch there. And I would say makers are like a totally untapped market for the AT industry. Like I'm not the first one to say that. But I think if we can make a path for makers to really get involved in AT, our whole industry is going to change like dramatically. So I'm just curious if anyone else out there has actually used a maker or some sort of maker project as an AT professional, or if any of the makers have worked with AT professionals on a specific project.
So I do that almost exclusively as a maker. And yeah, so I'm not sure what you're interested in hearing, though. I have to admit, I heard several things in your presentation already that I feel the need to comment on. One of them is your reference to, oh, there are all these places to go to find out what's possible. And I have also heard other people say, other AT people say, or other therapists say, I would really like to have a single source that I can go to. And boy, I don't know why more effort isn't put into that. So instead, you have vendors who will have a search function for their products. But of course, those don't include maker products, which, by the way, I equate totally with DIY. And if it's something that's made commercially, I don't consider it maker. If you're making something to sell it, you became a vendor, not a maker. Also, so your weird projects, I question whether they're weird at all, and whether there isn't a significant number of people who could benefit by it, and turn that weird thing into a customizable thing that would benefit lots of people.
Yes.
And then that brings a whole lot of other things with it, because now the maker has to stay involved. They can't just make that weird thing and move on.
Yes. Yes.
So anyway, I'll stop there.
Yeah, no, and that's a perfect, that's why I think if we can really bring in makers in a meaningful, purposeful way, it will change the industry because of exactly what you just said.
Antoinette, I think working in schools for as long as I did, the kids have such unique interests. So you were always trying to make like art sticks that a child with cerebral palsy could use with their mouth. So you're getting ideas, but then you still don't have the budget to purchase some of these things. So you have to get creative. So I've been around a lot of creative occupational therapists in the school districts with a lot of really cool kids.
Yeah, and I know you see a lot of really interesting projects like in the developing countries because of their limitation with budget. Sometimes they come up with stuff that would be applicable to anybody. So, when I was working on this presentation for resident for ATIA, I wanted to validate that my thought process was not crazy. So I interviewed a wide range of people, makers, AT professionals, and kind of asking them what they wish they existed, what were the obstacles. And I kind of came up with two main thoughts. A resource for makers, so people who can make things who want to get into AT, helping them do that. And then kind of like what you were saying, the one source, a place for AT professionals to find makers. And then after I did this interview, I kind
Antoinette, I
of
hate to interrupt you, but there is one place that already does both of those. It's called
okay.
Makers Making Change.
Yes, it does, but I'm going to tell you my little tweak on that. So
Sure.
I hear you, and yes, I agree. So after these interviews, because my kind of tweak on this is commercialization. I'm not against, there's a lot of nonprofits out there doing stuff, Makers Making Change, AT Makers. I just heard about Tom, which I'd never heard of before. I heard about that at ATIA. And they're doing more, some of the, 18 Makers Making Change is trying to, help it not be a one-off solution. But they tend to be more one-off solutions for a person that is done as a charity. And I'm not saying that any of that's a bad thing. But to your point, Ken, when you were talking about the solution for someone could be a solution for everybody, we need a path to get those products in someone's hands in a safe and reliable way. So, for example, there's a maker that I'm aware of that every once in a while he'll throw up these really great things, but they're really cool ideas, and I'm not saying that they're not useful, but it's him making it. And if it's not him making it, it can't get made. And if it breaks, I would never not tell someone about it if it's something that's useful to them. But as I'm putting myself in this as a company, I can't offer something like that if it's not a properly made and supported device. So that's kind of another part of this, is that trying to find a way, because there are obstacles, which I'm going to list in one moment, but there's reasons why
that maker is not making DIY devices.
Say again?
That maker is not making DIY devices. He's making do-it-myself devices. He's in the critical path.
Yes. I think one time this particular person popped up something and I said, okay, I have clients that could use this. How do I get my hands on this? And he's like, well, just have them call me. Okay. And yeah, so that's, again, I don't want to take away anything from the work that he's done, but it puts me in a position that I can't utilize that solution. So being able to legitimately get projects made in a way where it can get in the hands of people with disabilities. Like I said, there's already nonprofits and organizations that are doing that to a certain level. And to help overcome obstacles to getting projects in their hands. I thought this was interesting when I was doing these interviews. I think pretty much every maker that I talked to, or I can at least 3 of the 4 I think that I talked to, said kind of how they got into AT was that they went to a conference, they opened up a product, and they said, oh, that's just $10 in parts, I can make that. And again, we could talk for hours about and they were like, why are they charging $100 for this thing, so yes, but putting anyone who's ever even on some level put a product together, there's more than just the parts that are involved in that. And it's more to have a product that is sustainable, is important. So these are kind of just some top level obstacles. Kind of the top number one thing that always is first and foremost is liability. We want to make sure that products are made safe, but also along with that is warranty. It's not if, but when it breaks, how does it get fixed? Who do you call? Can you actually get in touch with someone? If you need help, is there a tech support number to call? There's all kinds, and I will be the first to say, I'm not an expert. I've never manufactured a product in my life, but just talking to the few people I did, there are some very specific regulatory requirements, even for things that you wouldn't realize. Manufacturing capabilities, design capabilities. So what I mean there is there are some makers that are really good, maybe they're really good at designing a board for something, but maybe they're not the best one to actually make it look pretty. but maybe there's someone else who's really good at making enclosures for things, but they're not really the board guy. So putting those people together. Access to technology for testing. So these are some of the obstacles, because again, I'm thinking like, I have clients, I have ideas already in my head of things that I would like to be made, but even if I could find someone to make it tomorrow, but I have no way to get it into the hands of the person who could actually benefit from it in a professional, reliable way. So this is a side discussion, but I'm just gonna throw it out there. When I said, the makers would open it up, oh, it's only $10 in parts, and kind of their thing is, well, I'm just gonna make another one. My focus is not about lowering the cost of AT. That might happen in certain areas, but that's not really my focus, because I would rather have a product that's sustainable than the lowest cost option. That might be a goal in certain situations, but really the purpose of my endeavor is, I'm not trying to put AT companies out of business. We're not trying to remake Buddy Button. We're not trying to remake things that commercially exist. There are reasons where maybe in a nonprofit situation you may want or need to do that. But really what I'm trying to make is a path for someone who knows how to make something, and people who have the people that need the things, get them together to have a commercial product. And right now there is no easy way to find those people. I mean, I know Ron, but there's tons of other Rons out there. So let's put together something where they can all get together. Or you have to know somebody who knows someone. And also, if you're on the maker side, practicing AT professionals, if you're talking OT, PT, speech, their funding is by time. So they literally have no free time to research this stuff. If they do, they're doing it on their own time. So the easier we can make it for them to find people who can help with these solutions, they may actually happen. So this is the best solution I've come up with. Now, we have your group, we have this Tamales group as well. I am starting a SIG, a special interest group in the RESNA organization. And like I said, literally this week, me and the co-chair are meeting together to start this process. Because I really do feel like RESNA is the right place to do this. And I'm saying this because I don't know what this is going to end up being. I kind of have some ideas, but I really want to start this conversation. So if anyone is interested in participating in this, if you go to our website, you can't, there's no link to it. You have to type in improveability.com/maker and fill out a form. Like I said, I'm meeting with the co-chair this week, and probably in the next month or so, we'll have a launch to really get things going. So really, this is what I want it to be: a path for projects to get made to meet the needs of people with disabilities, a place to bring those who would never know about AT into the industry, and providing a source of income for makers. If someone can't make a living doing this, and again, I'm not trying to take away from the nonprofits, please don't hear that, but there are people out there that they found AT and they want to do this as a job. Well, in order for them to do that, they have to make a living doing that. The good news is it's an easy sell for makers, because I don't know if any of y'all have ever, I'm sure some of y'all are familiar with Adafruit. They do the Ask an Engineer, and I've watched just a handful of those sessions. And again, some of those projects, I'm like, oh man, I have AT applications for that. They don't even know assistive technology is a thing. And when people in those positions find out, oh wait, I can make a thing that helps a person, and it's not just this intellectual exercise, it's super easy to get them excited about it. I think maybe for us in the AT world, I'll speak for myself. Recently I had an OT student, and it kind of reminded me that, I know this sounds silly, but the stuff we do is really cool. And I've been doing this for 24 years. So you kind of get not jaded, but you forget that, oh, we are doing things that actually change people's lives, let them do things that they couldn't do before. And seeing that through students and other people's eyes kind of reminded me of that.
Hey, Antoinette, can you just say a little bit more about what a a special interest group is like in the RESNA context?
Yeah.
How is that different from Facebook group?
So the special interest group under RESNA would be, so normally it's a group of RESNA members, but they do allow you to start a special interest group that not everyone has to be a member. We do have to have, I think there's a rule, you have to have 10 RESNA members for it to be official. The reason I'm wanting to put this under that umbrella is because I'm looking at commercial applications. I'm thinking that being under organization, we may be able to, like, let's use liability as an example. Maybe there's a way that RESNA could obtain some sort of liability insurance that would be some sort of group policy that makers could participate in. So being under a nonprofit organization and an industry organization that way, I'm hoping will open up some doors to get past some of these obstacles.
Okay.
So these are just kind of some of my ideas, a training course for makers, just, some basic, understanding of disability and kind of design criteria to think about. Again, these are really just my kind of, throw the spaghetti at the wall and see what sticks. How to vet that products are safe. Maybe there could even be like a certification that makers could get to show that they know about disability, so that as a AT professional, I could go to, and the SIG could be a place where like these resources are held. So they would be like a website or something, so that I'm an OT, practicing OT, I want to find a maker, at least if they have that check mark next to their name, I know that they have at least put forth some effort to understand the disability world. This is a big one. Resource for makers to make sure they're not reinventing the wheel. I'm sure all of us have seen projects, student projects on Facebook. It's like, you could have just bought that. AbleNet makes that. You don't need to do a whole semester project on that. Assistance with AT professionals helping to translate kind of into maker speak. Like, I mean, I'm an engineer, but again, I'm a mechanical engineer. I do not understand electrical stuff. I know just enough about this stuff to be super dangerous, but I don't know all the technical words. Like, I need a thing that does this, this, and this. How you make it do that? I don't know. And there's, oh, well, you need a diode for this and a LED for that. Okay, sure. So that's, I think that's the end of my presentation. Yeah. So again, if you are interested in joining that mailing list, please go to improveability.com maker, fill out that form. And, this is kind of in its infancy. So, again, I'd love to hear other people's feedback, and, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and we can have a discussion.
Antoinette, I was gonna comment in regards to that cost, like switches is a big thing. We're making a lot of switches now. But as a speech path, for me, if you take my hourly rate and the amount of time it would be for me to make that switch, it's actually cheaper when you put those two together for me to purchase that switch. So those are the things that I think it's easy I think it's a good project for a high school student, but I think the functionality of that in a school, we're not going to use those switches per se, because we've got so many switches in our lending libraries, etc. And that's where I want the more creative side coming together and doing more than just switches.
Right, exactly. Now again, if there's a high school group out there that wants to make 100 switches and give them away to free, I'm not going to be mad at them for that. But I feel like it's time to kind of raise, I don't want to say raise the bar, that's not the right way to say it, but take this to the next level of, okay, let's find a way to get, like, I mean, I'll give you all a perfect example. We, as a company, we work with a lot of people with ALS who use eye gaze. If you are dependent upon your eye gaze, basically your life is based on a Windows computer working properly, which I don't know about y'all, but I wouldn't want to take that chance. So we have a number of clients. I could rattle off 5 names right now off the top of my head of people who are very dependent on their eye gaze. They have no other access method besides eye gaze. again, not if, but when their computer goes kaput, because it's a Windows computer, and even if it's an iPad, you know, there are some iCase iPads out there now. It's a piece of equipment, is going to break. Right, I have one client that the only way he has to get someone's attention is his vent alarm going off. Maybe that's not the best way to get someone's attention. So, you know, an eye gaze switch, that is a very technically not complicated thing to do. But, and I bet you Ron can make it if I force him to do it, but I can't give that to someone. Because now you're saying this thing is gonna work in that emergency situation. So that's where it gets hairy. You know, can that be made? Yes, it can be made. As a company, can I supply that to someone and charge them money for that? Without having those, you know, liability insurance and all those things in place, I can't. So that's a perfect example of a project that is technically achievable, but the liability is stopping it from being a product that's out in the market.
Yeah, I mean, to that, I mean, working with Bridging Voice in New York, we had developed basically an alarm system that would tell if an eye gaze device failed. It was ready to go in production, but the liability and the lawyers got involved and cut. So, you know, I know exactly how to make it. I have all the parts to make this stuff, but, you know, I can't sell it. I can't give it away.
We can't hear you. Ken, we can't hear you.
I can't give it away. Oh, Ken.
Yeah,
Ken.
I'm a little bit stymied because I don't see how makers will address that problem. Every time there's a discussion about makers making change, comes to a conference and makes a presentation, the killer question is, what about liability? So makers isn't the solution to this problem. It's something else.
Right, and that's why I'm trying to start this group, because that's part of, you know, the purpose of the group is to get connected with larger organizations that could potentially have some sort of umbrella. Like I talked to this one guy who he's been in the AT industry and he's actually made a number of products. So it was really interesting to talk to him because it puts some like concrete stuff, like he makes a product. He was able to get product liability for that product, which now I know it's product specific, okay? And like one idea he threw out was maybe there's some sort of organization, could be a university, could be a RESNA, could be some other organization that could hold the IP in a way that it would be protected and covered so that if something were to go wrong, if you're...
That sounds like a different topic. IP control, that's different from liability for something.
Yes.
I think it'd be real interesting for you to have a quick discussion with Resna. You may find out real quickly they are not interested in that at all. Somehow their organization providing liability protection for products that they know no one is doing the level of testing and safety and all that that's required for a real product.
Well, then I also think about ASL exists. You know, probably the most risky part of anything is giving someone alternate access to a wheelchair. So they're a company that exists. There's a way to protect these products in a way that they have been a company for 30 years.
That's a commercial company though, Antoinette. That's commercial. They have profit loss. They do all those calculations to make sure they can support they can pay for their liability insurance.
Mm-hmm.
This is I view AT as makers as a different beast, and you know, they're not selling a product and coming up with business plans to pay for all aspects of it, and so to expect someone else to step in like Resna and somehow take on responsibility for liability. I would love to. I'm not
saying that Resna would be the one. It's just that's the only place I know of to start a group like this. But like, what if there was a place that the IP is held that ASL could license? So now ASL is making it. They didn't spend all the time to design it and all of that. Again, these are Antoinette's ideas. but I'm open to suggestions. I'm just very frustrated as someone who has products and solutions that I know my clients need, and I know are technically possible, that I cannot get in their hands.
Somehow the end user has to assume the liability. I don't know how you do that, but that's the only way makers can take on any tasks that where failure is a possibility and injury is a possibility, is the end user has to assume that. And that's difficult. That's difficult in court.
Right. And I mean, if you really want to go down this rabbit hole, if you go to AT Maker's page, he has a over hour session that he did about liability. It was actually, if you're interested in it, it was fascinating on some level, also frustrating on the other level. But I just refuse to let liability stop us from trying to make something happen. So, I mean, maybe I'll come back in 2 years and say, sorry, I did my best, I couldn't figure it out. But I don't want to give up on trying to find a way to do it. Like I said, I mean, I agree with you. That's why it's not about making a low cost product. The product may cost money, but it's because of needing the insurance, needing those things, and how can we make that happen? Oh, so actually Shannon saying the quality of life should trump liability. Yes, but again, like Ken said, it's the person who takes the chance. So actually, I think it was Bill from AT Makers that made this example. I can't remember what it was, some kind of interface that the client was using. She lost access to her wheelchair controls, and she had a friend who was able to cobble something together for her, and she had very unique needs. And she knew that it wasn't great and it could fail tomorrow. When of course us, as professionals, we're thinking, oh Lord, she's going to be stuck out in the middle of the field in the 100 Texas heat. I won't be able to sleep at night because I gave her this thing. But her attitude was, I'd rather have something than nothing. And I can make the same argument for the eye gaze switch. If I was sitting in bed staring at an eye gaze system and that's my only way to get someone's attention, I'd rather have something than nothing. So again, I feel like there is a path. I just don't know what that looks like at this moment.
I would love to see that waiver of liability document that an actual lawyer puts effort into designing.
Yeah.
And
well, actually, if you watch Bill's
will hold up in court.
Waivers don't work.
Well, whatever it is, something that will hold up in court so that you say, I am doing the best I can. I am not in a position to offer liability insurance. I don't have it myself. You have to assume it. And if you don't assume it, then don't use my stuff. So again, there has to be some contract that you can engage in, and that's got to be written by a lawyer.
Oh yeah, because again, if you watch that thing that Bill did, he actually went to law school because he was so frustrated and wanted to figure this out himself. And what was, Ron, maybe you remember, because I think you were involved in some of those, like a risk assessment. And so there was something that they had looked at. I don't know if it ever really got formalized through AT Makers, but there was kind of like an intellectual exercise. Maybe if you had this risk assessment document that was made public, that okay, if you buy this product, you're agreeing to, and look, I mean, we're talking, because I think he did the exercise for the IntelliKeys thing, and I mean, you have to think of every single possibility. So it's like, what if the cord gets wrapped around the person's finger and cuts their finger? I mean, it's even things as silly as that are a risk that you're taking by using this product. So that was kind of something that he had talked about, was having this risk assessment document where a consortium of people got together, looked at the product, and would literally write down, here are all the potential risks, here are the chances of that happening, and if it's something that was of a high chance, here's how we're negating that. Again, that's still not a contract necessarily, so I think he was looking at it more for him as a nonprofit. Could they provide this document to at least make it public and knowledgeable? Yes, we know these minimal risks exist. This is what we've done to mitigate them.
And this call here, we're coming up at 4:30. So does anyone have any last questions or comments? But I do want to thank you so much again, Antoinette, for a really, really great presentation, and excited to have the next meeting in March, I want to say 12th, with Ken describing some of his projects upcoming. But anyone else have any last comments? If not, we can go ahead.
I think Antoinette, you brought up a lot of things that are spinning in my head, and I like it. And I think having these conversations is really important. And I look at the tamales like in Texas, we're funded for Texas, so it's bringing Texas makers together. But then I want it to be a way to reach out and pull in like high school students and college students and bring more people together so that those that want to move forward into more of that AT only realm can take that turn into something like Resna. So I would see us more like a stepping stone to get there.
Yeah.
Because I think we need all parts of this because we're all working parts of a system. But I think we need to be more connected so that we know where we have some idea of where we're going. So this might only be a fun project and we're going to just see if we can do it. But then this has got a lot of potential. So let's send this on to our Resna makers where it will have more people looking into that liability issue. So I see this more as a growing system.
Totally. And like I said, I feel like we're kind of at this cusp. I feel like there's enough awareness now with AT and makers that it's not a pipe dream. Like, there actually is a groundswell of people that are making things for people with disabilities. And as an industry, I feel like now's the time to formalize that and try to make it more purposeful instead of just this kind of mishmash of people. So, trying to make it more conglomerated.
Respectfully integrated. And, I think sometimes I see really valued makers, and I don't think some of the therapists who understand what life-changing things they can bring to an individual, and if you don't have that full awareness, I think they get sold short. So
Well,
I think
there was a presentation at Resna, and I know the woman was OT. I don't remember the background of the gentleman. I think he was from the computer realm, but they were working on a project of making it easier for an OT. Because again, a general OT, they don't have the time, like they can't even, the idea of telling them, oh, just 3D print it, like that is a non-starter, like it's never going to happen. But the idea was that it was something they're working on. Say someone had designed, like, let's use like a pencil grip. I mean, that's a silly example, but a special pencil grip that worked for a particular person. Well, they could put that design on this website. Now, if you wanted to go and print it yourself, you could, but their kind of special sauce was an OT could find that thing and they could just hit print and it would show up on their doorstep. So that's kind of what their project was about, which just the fact that that discussion was happening, I'm like, okay, there is this idea of, regular OTs and therapists out there are wanting access to these highly customizable products.
And another part of our program, I think, is bringing, once again, like I'm familiar with the school base. So your OTs and your PTs and your speech paths in a school setting do not have time to be makers unless you're like me, who's highly motivated and work after hours. But you've got all of these maker groups in high schools that with brilliant minds. And so like Austin Independent School District, they're setting it up so that their OTs, PTs, and SLPs can just order those parts from the maker groups, and they're learning some of that pre-rehab. So that's another part of this foundational piece for us also. So it's really bringing people together at like I said, systemically, so that those high school kids can start making it. The ones who are really interested can move into more of your fields like Resna.
Yeah.
And that's where we're at. But anyways, I don't want to prolong the meeting because we do want to like honor the 1 hour. So any last comments besides me?
Fantastic. Well, with that being said, thank you guys so much for attending today's meeting. And Antoinette, thank you so much again for presenting and taking the time today. looking forward to seeing y'all in March. Awesome.
Hey,
Thanks so much, y'all.
one thing, Colt, does
Yes.
Antoinette, do you have an email address?
Yes,
Drop it in the chat or unless it's
Antoinette at
related?
ImproveAbility.com. You can also find it on our website. You can get to my contact information there, but I just put it in the chat.
Okay.
And I
And
can
Ken,
al-
she will be at our conference next summer also, I believe.
And I
So,
can also put Antoinette's email in like the recap email, or sorry, Antoinette's email in like the recap email that I'll send out in a few days as well. So
And cool, I
Nice
sent you
job.
the presentation, so if you want to include that, you can.
oh,
That's
fantastic.
my contact information at the end.
thanks so much.
All right.
Awesome. Well, I think we're good to go ahead and end the meeting, but thank you all so much again for attending. Appreciate it. Awesome. Bye, y'all.
Right.